welcome to this new talk, Far From Home, a talk with a friend abroad. Our guest this afternoon is Isotta, and it can be, so you're Aussie living in Italy, but then you're also kind of Italian. Then you will explain like what's your story and your situation. But what is interesting, and I want to mention this because I'm also calling for, like, if you're interested, if you're living abroad, like, get in touch and share your experience. But I also have friends that they told me that I should also consider the internal migration in Italy. So a Sicilian living in Milano or a Sicilian living in Rome is actually far from home. And it was since today that now Italy kind of reopened the different regions. So also if you have an internal migrant, get in touch. Thank you. So thank you, Isotta, for joining us.
No worries. So I suppose you want me to introduce myself now?
Yes. So the first question is actually how you ended. So who are you? Yes. And how you ended up where you are now.
Right. So I'm Isotta, otherwise known as Izzy to most of my Aussie and English-speaking friends. I'm Italian-Australian and I'm currently living in Italy, but I only moved back a couple of years ago. So before that, I was traveling. Well, I was living in different countries in Europe, including the UK, Russia, and Malta. And before that, I was in Italy, and prior to that, still, I was in Australia. So I'd say migration is my cup of tea in that sense, or movement, more so.
Okay, sorry, just because the live stream stopped. So
okay.
So we redo it.
We're rewinding.
Yes, exactly.
No worries.
Sorry.
Joys of technology.
Yes. So let me I redo everything, so to be sure.
Do you want me to close this? Do you want me to join again, or shall I?
No, it's fine. Okay, yes. So now you're live. We are live. So welcome again. We are here for our talk this week again. Far From Home, a talk with a friend abroad. Our friend this week is Isotta, or Izzy. And I was mentioned before, but probably the live was not actually streamed. So every one of our guests actually has an interesting story, even if maybe they don't consider themselves like traditional migrant or like expat, or they were expat, now they're kind of back in one of their home. And I also have friends that ask me to consider also the internal migration. So like Sicilian living like far from home in Milano or Venice or Rome. So maybe if you, I'm open. So if you are an external migrant or internal migrant in a country, feel free to get in touch and be our next guest. So back to Isotta. Welcome to be here.
Thank you.
And the first question is actually how you ended up where you live now.
How I ended up here. Okay, so I'm Izzy, as Viviana mentioned already. I am Italian-Australian, and I'm currently living in Italy. I moved back here a couple of years ago. Before that, I was living in Malta, where I lived for 3 years. Prior to that, I was in the UK. Before, I was in Italy still, and earlier on in Australia. So I've been moving around a fair bit. If I can introduce myself, apart from being Italian-Australian, I'm also a criminologist. I focus on the intersections of criminal law and migration law, so I work primarily on research and project work with refugees, migrants, and victims of gender-based violence. And I'm a sports person and a feminist, which I think are all important layers of my identity.
Yes, and I think, so the question here is, one is, so where is home for you? Because the talk is far from home.
Yep.
So you were kind of at home, but also I know you were also follow Australia and also be inspired by something that happened in Australia for something that then you develop here. And then the other question is how you describe like being a feminist, and also or like came from some of your international experience, or what your identity that came from your international experience.
Okay, so the second question is pretty tough, and I'm going to answer it later on. I think I'll go with the first one, which is probably going to allow me to rant on for ages, because actually I've been reflecting on what home is for me and where home is for a very long time, for as long as I can remember. And it's also been a topic that's come up a lot in my work, particularly with refugees and migrants. Because I think you start thinking about home either when you're, a bit messed up like me, you have a bit of a hybrid identity, you've moved around a lot, you're privileged enough to spend time abroad, to live abroad for extended periods of time. And so you create new terms of comparison that make you reflect on your home country and what you like and what you dislike. Or, there are other situations like when you're forced to leave home, you're a displaced person, you're a refugee, and that's when you realize, oh, that was home, and that's what home meant to me. And I think there's probably also a third situation that I'm not going to go into because it's very complex, but it's also when you experience injustice at home and you feel excluded or marginalized. And I think that also affects, your feelings, your sense of belonging, and perhaps also gets you reflecting on what home is to you. So I belong to the first group, the group of the messed up people or the privileged people. And let's say that normally when I introduce myself, I always say I'm Italian Australian. Just because it saves me time, because normally people are a bit puzzled. They can't figure out my accent. They can't understand how I can switch from fluent Italian to fluent English. Or maybe, something that I say gives it away that I know Italy very well, but I also know Australia pretty well. So that's normally why I say it. But in part, it reflects how I feel as well. Although I have to say the Italian side of my identity has been the most difficult side to reconcile with, because for a very long time Italy didn't feel like home to me, because if we go back to that concept of home that I was hinting to before, I think it's made up of many factors, which for me at least include a sense of belonging in terms of feeling that you embrace certain aspects of a culture. For instance, if there is a mainstream culture, that's also difficult to pin down. But let's say that, you identify with certain key aspects of a culture, you can communicate fluently and easily in a language so that you're easily understood and people don't keep on asking you where you're from. And, maybe there are certain festivities, certain rituals, certain cultural norms that you also endorse and you participate in. So there's that side of things. There's family, clearly, and loved ones. But, even in that case, my understanding of family is very micro, on the micro scale, on the small scale. For me, it's my parents and my partner. And for other people that I've met, like many Libyan migrants, it's extended family. So, it can change a lot. And there's also, at least for me, I think it links back to that sense of belonging that I was talking about before, but more so the cultural norms and the behaviors and the attitudes and all of that, that in Italy I struggled with, hence why for a long time it didn't feel like home. So I felt completely out of place because having spent so much time abroad and having this hybrid identity, I didn't feel like certain behaviors that were extremely common, both, for instance, in education or in the workplace, reflected who I am or who I believe I am. And so for a very long time, that's how I felt, even though, my loved ones were in part living in Italy and my parents had moved back to Italy. So I'd say it's a shifting concept for me. Home is a shifting concept. But then there's also this other layer to home, which I want to add beyond sense of belonging, language, family, and these cultural and social norms, which is a sort of mystical factor that I like to refer to, which I can't really explain, and I've only experienced in Australia. So, I guess possibly I should call Australia home more than I call Italy home. I'm not sure about that. But it's this factor that I can't really pin down, and it's just basically getting out of the plane, getting out of the airport, and suddenly feeling that I'm just where I want to be, in the right place, and the sounds and the smells fill my nostrils, fill my ears, fill my heart, and I suddenly feel that I'm okay.
Yes. No, thank you. I think was great. And I was also thinking, I just came back to Brazil in January. I'm not half Brazilian, but Brazil is really one place that I can call home. And I had exactly that reaction. It was like everything was really perfect, in the sense it was just, for me, I really could feel that. And I know it's not a perfect place. There are many like challenges there. It's difficult, but it's a place that I can feel I'm at home, despite everything. There are two important points I think that you mentioned. One is kind like the comparison between migration, that of course we know that there are kind of more like there are forced migration, and then there are like migration that you choose to migrate for a better life or better opportunities. And the idea of this talk was actually also to consider the one that even if you choose to migrate and you are like the lucky one, but there is still something, that some grief and some like challenges, and so you should not be like ashamed of yourself if you're feeling that you are sad because you are like far from home, even if you can still easily go home. So this was also, I think, one challenges during the COVID-19, even if you are a lucky migrant or one that actually chooses migration or the fact to migrate, but still there was this grief, this sadness, and this like pain. And it's interesting because I was also, every time I think about my relationship, is we are in a long distance like relationship, but if I think about all the migrants that I interview in the past, they were in a long distance relationship, and they didn't see each other for years. So it was like, there was not a matter of weeks. They knew from the Philippines or from Peru that it was like from 1 year, 2 years, and then maybe they could like reunite the family or like travel back and see the family and stay for like 1 or 2 months there. So it's always interesting when you have experienced also some like stories and the stories of migration that really it's interesting, and you can compare with yourself and then see that it's not so bad what actually you are experiencing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And the other point is it was also, I think, like home and where are the loved ones. And again, is also interesting because it's a matter of how you consider your family and your loved ones. And when you have extended family also, so you know that you can travel and easily find someone of the family. Again, for some migrants, this is like something that can really be helpful. And so the support network that you have, or maybe you don't have in the country where you move, can also make the difference if you feel at home or not.
Absolutely. And to answer your second question, which was about feminism and how my international experience helped me to realize that side of my identity, or to acknowledge it more. I think definitely traveling helped. I think definitely studying in the UK helped. I'm not entirely sure I would have come to that realization had I studied in Italy, but who knows? Life is full of surprises. I also have to say that my work helped me come to that realization because I work with many victims of gender-based violence. And so I think I started reflecting on gender more than I had before. Also, interestingly, moving to countries in Southern Europe, moving back to Italy as well, but moving to countries in Southern Europe helped me reflect on gender a bit more because of certain attitudes that I had long forgotten, certain behaviors that are pretty common in the south of Europe, that impacted me in different ways. And so it was a process, I think. But also, gender isn't detached from from other factors that are also very important when it comes to identity. So, you know, for instance, when I was in Malta, my nationality was also important in that sense. My dual nationalities were also important. My sense of feeling foreign and being a young foreign woman was important at the time in different contexts. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes,
It was a pretty difficult one.
I know, but no, I know. But was actually, it's interesting, and I think it's something also that came out from other talks. Your international experience also help you to define your identities more. So, and also to understand the complexity of your identity. So it's not all, and you can also play with your identity. So in Malta, I'm an Italian, but if I go back to Italy, I'm actually from Lombardy. And again, and I'm not only like Italian or from Lombardy, I'm a woman. We can really define our identities, and we are aware of the complexity of our identities, I would say.
Yeah. And I mean, identity is also very interactional. So,
exactly.
You know, it's when you meet others that very often you realize who you are. So,
yes. And also another point that you mentioned, and I always say this in my training, because can be funny if you can like play with it, is like what you are frustrated about something, and this something probably will define what are your values and what you care more. So in the case of like being a woman, we know there are cultures where we can find something that is like frustrating, but even if you are like a man, you can find something that can be frustrating for you, and this can help you to define what are your values, what are the things that you care the most, what's important to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, although you can play around with your identity, I think it's also important to stress that, you know, certain layers of identity are crucial to people because of their experiences, which in many cases are very painful experiences. So
yes,
that's something to always bear in mind.
Yes, no. The awareness is also to recognize the painful identity that you have and the others that they have. So just again, and don't put them in boxes, and everything that we train also in the course that we are with together.
Yeah, definitely.
So the second question is actually about the challenges of these times, and challenges of like personal challenges, professional challenges, and challenges of being there.
Yeah. So specifically related to COVID-19. Right. Yeah, no, sure. So I was in Italy. I'm still in Italy. And so I spent the whole of lockdown in Italy, in one of the worst hit regions. So it was pretty tough. And again, that sense of being home, but far from home, far from my second home, did play in a bit in terms of how I was feeling, because many of my friends, not just Australian friends, but let's say most of my Australian friends were messaging. Many of my Australian friends have actually lived in Italy for periods of time, some of them for extended periods of time because they were working here. Mm-hmm. And so they would message me and they would ask me what was going on, and if everything was okay, if my family was okay, because they were really concerned. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I'm probably going to break a trend here, because I'm sure that your previous speakers talked a lot about how hard it was for them to be far from their loved ones, and how they struggled because they were worried. And I'm going to say something a little bit different. So for me, it was a different sensation, because others were concerned about me, because it was so much worse in Italy than it was in Australia. And I have to admit, I wasn't as worried about friends or family abroad and in Australia, because it felt like it was a little bit better than it was here. But then again, media reports aren't always that reliable. That was a general feeling though. So how I felt about that was, for a bit, I was annoyed, because I could understand that they were concerned about me, but I was just very overwhelmed with the situation, and it was very difficult for me to update people with what was going on when I myself couldn't really understand what was happening and couldn't put my finger on it. So that was challenging. At the same time, in retrospect, I remember how I was feeling when there were the bushfires in Australia. And, you know, I was doing exactly the same thing. I was messaging my friends, although my friends live in big cities, so they weren't as affected. So I knew they were going to be okay. But because media reports were so alarming and I couldn't really tell what was true and what was fake news, I would message my friends and I would ask for updates. So probably they felt the same. I'm not sure. Maybe they didn't feel the same. But, you know, I behaved in exactly the same way. And that's the challenge of being far from people you love. Far from home in a way. So that's how I experienced COVID. In terms of, you know, how I reacted, I think COVID's been hard. From my perspective, it's been hard because it's separated people, not just physically, but also I think, you know, for somebody like me who prides herself on being so international and has friends all over the world, I think I've never felt so far from all my friends. And it's a paradox, actually, because we should have felt part of this common humanity that was going through very much the same challenges, you know. But because of how it's been portrayed, because of many measures that have been put into place, I think, you know, we felt far from everybody else. And I also personally felt useless. I felt that I couldn't help anybody. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I wasn't working. I was working remotely. So, you know, I really felt that I couldn't make my contribution. And I struggled with that a lot. So I ended up setting up an Instagram page. And again, I think home is relevant in this discussion because it is inspired by an Australian page that is way more successful than my Instagram page because it was set up by a pretty well-known figure in Australia. She's a very inspirational lady who's known for, I mean, personal experience that she had, but she's wonderful and she has many followers, and so her page is fantastic. My page is okay. But to cut a long story short, it's a page to support small businesses. So Turaya Pitts, set it up at the time of the bushfires to support small businesses. And it's a pretty cool page where, you know, people can get in touch, they can promote their business, and then if any followers want to purchase from them, they can just contact them by email, website, and so on. And so I wanted to do the same thing in Italy because I felt so useless, and I wanted to create a network and make my contribution, as I was saying before. So I set it up and got the ball rolling, and I can proudly say that I have 322 followers today. But it's actually been great because I think what I wanted to recreate was that sense of community that there is in Australia. So, you know, that neighborly feeling of helping each other out. And in ways, I think this experience was good because I realized that there are some wonderful people out there. There are amazing small businesses in Italy that are doing fantastic work, and I had no idea that they existed. So, you know, I had the opportunity to have such great chats with artisans and people who make wine or honey, and it was great. But also I realized that it's not that easy to recreate something that works in a certain country, in a certain local context somewhere else. So I think Italy is much more complex, and sense of community over here is different. It's perceived different, it's experienced differently. So it's been challenging, but also fun and also very enriching.
Yeah, I don't know if you said the name is Humans of Italy.
No, so the page is called Humans of Italy Business, and I try to post content both in Italian and in English, because one of the objectives is also to reach out to expats who are in Italy and have a business. I have no idea how many of them there are, because it can be very challenging to set up a business in Italy if you're a foreigner. But that's the idea. So yeah, look it up by all means. It's humans_of_Italy_business.
Great. I think you did a great job with that, and also like it was good for you probably because I think that many of us, like we felt the same feeling of being like useless, and so we try to find ways where we could like do something or like support in any way, any possible way in what was happening, or like who actually needs support at that time. And we're not only something like related to healthy, but also we know that the economy is also and has been and will be like affected by this. So I think it was a great idea. And it was also interesting what you mentioned, the idea of, and again, is something like intercultural communication, intercultural management, we know, but at the same time, when you test it, then you realize that, yeah, what is like working in a country, maybe is not working in another country, or you have to like put it in a different way, make some adjustment, because a different idea of like the community, a different idea of like supporting each other, or different idea of like the use of technology or marketing themselves.
For sure.
So,
for sure, you definitely have to tweak it a little bit. Plus, at least I don't think
you can share that something that you realize, oh, this work in Australia, but actually in Italy I should do.
I think it's just so much more spontaneous in Oz.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I would have to talk to Taraya, but she's a well-known figure, so I guess for her, you know, there wasn't that issue of trust. Mm-hmm. While over here, I felt that there was that issue of trust. So people would ask me, you know, who are you? And initially I was really reluctant to talk about me on the page because I thought it wasn't relevant. You know, it's not about me. Yes, I'm not a small business. I'm self-employed. So in ways, the page is also for freelancers and self-employed people. So yes, of course, I fit the bill. But then again, you know, the page wasn't about me and I didn't want to talk about me. But at the same time, I think for a mix of cultural factors and just the way social media works, people wanted to know more about me and wanted to be able to trust me. So I got lots of people messaging, asking, well, lots of people just didn't reply. And others would reply asking me whether I had to pay anything or if it was free. And so yeah, it was an interesting experiment. I think I'm trying to think if there are any lessons learned that I can share.
It's also great because it could be because she was already like well known, but at the same time, like trust is really cultural. So in Australia, or let's say the Anglo-Saxon country, like the US, is more trust based. So if you're good in what you do, or like the tool is good, you have my trust. But in Italy, it's relationship based. So I want to know you,
absolutely,
check who you are, and the use that you will make of all my information. So it's more to build a relationship, and then I trust you.
Yeah. Just to give you a simple example, I mean, I had to draw up just a document where I would inform people. I actually had to ask a friend of mine who's a lawyer to do it for me, where I inform people of how I use their data, which has to do with, you know, regulations in Europe, but also has to do with this cultural factor that you were talking about.
Yes, interesting. Really.
So, yeah.
Good. So now we're almost at the end of our talk, and now is the time for the message to your countries, homes in your
life. So what kind of message? It can be any message? It
can be any message.
Right. I think I'm just going to go with "Good day, mate," which I hope to be able to say soon. I hope to be able to travel to Australia soon. I had vowed at the beginning of this year to spend a couple of months in Oz every year, and COVID has changed that completely. So I hope I'll be able to say "Good day, mate" to my friends sometime soon.
Wow. I think that is interesting also what you mentioned, that actually, we were like sharing the same global situation, but we felt far from each other. And I think it is for the present, but also for the future, because we don't know how we'll be, and we will be able to travel again as before. And so yes, it's like we feel now that we are far, because when I will be able to go back or to go to any other place. Now for me, like the airport just, as you know, and all my Facebook friends know, so the airport in Malta will reopen the 1st of July, but not for Italy or the continental Italy, but only for like Sardinia and Sicily. So I'm close, but actually I cannot go back home or to one of my home.
And I think for somebody like you and like me, like many others who's so used to jumping on a plane and having that freedom, this is definitely something new, something to learn to deal with.
Yes, exactly. That would be a big challenge for us, and we would probably need to find other ways to feel like close to our
definitely
friends. So thank you very much. Thank you for sharing.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Maybe we mention again the page. If you want to follow the page, is Humans of Italy Business.
Yes, with lots of underscores, but you should be able to find it.
Good. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Viviana.
For following us. Bye-bye.
Bye.